Hi everyone, so like I promised, here is the video of myself going over the test review. Okay, I didn't leave much room, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna zoom in super close, just so I have more room to write, okay? So, this first question, right? We're going to factor the following two questions. So question 1 and question 2. We're gonna factor those out, all right? And we're gonna leave them in factor form. So, this is one of the first things that we learned when we got to this unit, okay? So, what we talked about with factoring, we had a couple steps to do this, okay? So, step 1 was we needed to list my A, B, and C. So in this case, A was 1, B is -6, and C is -55. Okay, so that was step 1. And then what we were doing from that is we were gonna go ahead and multiply A times C. Okay, so in this case, A times C is 1 times -55, which gives us -55, okay? And then what we were doing from there is we were just gonna go ahead and factor, right? We wanted to find all the factor pairs of -55. And remember, when we have a negative number, we need to multiply two different ways. So we have a -1 times 55 and a +1 times -55. Okay, and we also have one more factor pair of 55, which is -5 and +11, and 5 and -11. Okay, so that was step 2. Step 2 is finding all the factor pairs of A times C. Okay, and then what I need to do is I need to find the factor pair that one of these 4 factor pairs that adds up together to give me a -6. Okay, so I'm going to go through my factor pairs. -1 plus 55 is a +54, so not 6. 1 minus 55 is 1 plus -55 is -54, not 6. -5 plus 11 is a +6, so not -6. And 5 plus -11 gives me that -6 that I'm looking for. Okay? And we had a little hint here. So when A is equal to 1, we can just write 2 parentheses. Okay? And what we do is we're going to add X. We're going to add an X in front of each parentheses. So this is only when A equals 1 can we do this. Okay? And then what you're going to do from there is just fill in the factor pairs that you chose. So I'm going to do it down here. We chose a +5, so X plus 5. And then we chose a -11, so we have X minus 11. And this is in factored form, so I want you to leave your answer like this. Okay? So that one's pretty simple because A is equal to 1. Now in the next one, A is not going to be equal to 1, so we have to follow a few different steps. Okay? So if you have any questions on this type of question, let me know. Okay? All right, then we're going to move on to B. Now, we're going to follow the first few same steps. The steps don't change until a little later on. Okay? So in this case, we need to label A, B, and C. So in this case, A is 3, B is -16, and C is 5. Okay? So same step again. But this time we're gonna use our X. This is how we learned this problem, okay? And on the top, we're gonna put what A times C is. And in this case, it's 3 times 5. So in the top box, I'm gonna put a 15, okay? And then in the bottom box, I'm gonna put what B was. And B was -16, okay? So before we put anything on the sides of our X, we need to go ahead and multiply A times C, which we did already, which is 15. So now we have to find all the factor pairs of 15, okay, a +15. So my first obvious one is 1 and 15. But you also have to remember that a -1 and a -15 gives us +15, okay? And then we have a +3 and a +5 and a -3 and a -5, okay? So those are all our factors, all right? So now we're going to follow the same step like we did in the last problem, and we need to find which factor pair adds up to give me b, which is negative 16, okay? And 1 plus 15 gives me a positive 16, so that's not it. And a negative 1 plus a negative 15 gives me negative 16. So that's the factor pair I'm choosing, okay? And then what I want to do is I want to come up to my x that I've already drawn, and I'm going to put a negative 1x on one side and a negative 15x on the other, okay? So it's important to remember that you add those x's to those numbers because we have to plug them back in, okay? So now we're going to do exactly what I just said, and we are going to keep the first 3x squared, right? Because we are plugging in these two negative 1x and negative 15x for our b, okay? So I have 3x squared minus 1x minus 15x plus 5. So I've plugged in these two terms for negative 16x, okay? So that's my next step. So then my following step is then to group. So I'm hopefully this is ringing a bell. We're gonna group these together and we're gonna group these together, okay? And then what we do from there is we factor out a GCF. And in this first example, my GCF between 3x and negative 1x is just an x, okay? And then I need to find what I need to multiply x by to get me 3x squared. And I know that x times 3x is 3x squared. And then I need to find what x needs to be multiplied by to get me a negative 1x. And I know that it's just a negative 1. So now group 1 is complete. So now we're going to go to group 2, okay? And group 2, I see a negative in front immediately. So I'm going to pull out a negative immediately before I even look for a GCF, okay? So I pull that negative out, and now I'm looking to see what the GCF is from 15x and 5. And I know that 5 fits into negative 15x and 5 fits into 5. So that's my GCF, okay? Then I need to find out what negative 5 needs to be multiplied by to get negative 15x. And I know that negative 5 times 3x will give me negative 15x. And then negative 5 times what will give me a positive 5. And I just know I need to multiply by a negative 1. Okay? And now that I see that both of my terms inside my parentheses are the same, I know that I have the correct answer. And I have to remind myself that those two numbers inside the parenthesis becomes one parenthesis. And then I take my outside terms, and that becomes the other parenthesis. And this is the correct answer because you're just leaving it in factored form. Okay? So if you have any questions on that, let me know. We're going to move on to question number 2. Okay? And question number 2 is asking us to use the zero product property. Okay? And what's important about the zero product property is the word zero. Okay? So when we're looking to use the zero product property, all that means is that you're setting both parentheses equal to 0 and solving. So I'm setting 5x plus 2 equal to 0, and I'm setting 4x minus 10 equal to 0. Okay? And then all we need to do is solve a two-step equation. Okay? So I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. So now I have 5x equals negative 2. But x is still not by itself, so I need to go ahead and divide 5 on each side. So my end answer for the first one is negative 2 over 5. Okay? Now for the second one, I need to add 10 to both sides. And then I'm left with 4x equals positive 10. And then lastly, just divide by 4, and x is equal to 10 over 4, okay, which reduces to 5 over 2. Okay, so those are my two answers. All right, moving on to the next one. So number 7, for number 3, we're just simplifying and writing down solutions for complex numbers. So this is what we just learned, okay? So what's important about this question is that there is a plus sign here. So I know that when I'm adding complex numbers, everything just drops out of the parentheses. And I'm just combining like terms. Okay, so 5 plus 2 is 7, and 7i plus 4i is 11i. And that's your answer. So those are pretty simple, okay? So the addition, they're just dropping out and you're combining like terms. Now, with subtraction, because we have a subtraction sign here, that's our clue, we need to make sure that we're flipping the signs of just the second parenthesis. So the first parenthesis is just going to drop right out, so 8 minus 4i. And then I have a positive 1, so that's going to become a negative 1. And I have a negative 10i, so that's going to become a positive 10i. Okay, so I just flip the signs of the numbers in the second parentheses. And once I've done that, I can go ahead and combine like terms. So I have 8 minus 1, which gives me 7. And then I have negative 4i plus 10i, which gives me a positive 6i. Okay, so my final answer is 6 plus 7i. All right. On to number 5. So now, when we have two sets of parentheses like this, this means multiplication. So when we're multiplying two parentheses, we use the box method, okay? And 8 plus 11i goes on top, and negative 5 minus negative I goes on the left side, okay? And then all you do is you multiply here. All right, so negative 5 times 8 is 40, negative 40. Then I'm going to do negative 5 times 11i, which gives me a negative 55i. And then I'm going to come down to this negative I times 8, which gives me a negative I, 8i. And then the last box, I have negative I times an 11i. And remember, when you have two i's, this becomes I squared. And don't forget that I squared is equal to negative 1. So immediately, once I see a negative 1, an I squared, I'm going to cancel it out and write in negative 1. Okay? And then if you would like, you can go ahead and draw your Z. And that tells you which direction to write your answers in. So I'm starting with a negative 40 to a negative 55i to a negative 8i. And then negative 11 times negative 1 gives me a positive 11. Okay, so that I squared cancels out and becomes negative 1. And then we just combine like terms. So we have negative 40 plus 11, which is 29. And then we have a negative 55 and a negative 8, a negative 29. And then a negative 55 and a negative 8, which gives me negative 63i. And that is your answer. Okay, so that's how we work on those. Now, over to the next question. We see that we are taking the square root of negative 50, okay? And immediately, when I see a negative, I need to go ahead and pull that I out. Because remember, this is technically saying negative 1 times 50, and we know that the square root of negative 1 is equal to I. So I'm pulling an I out and leaving the positive square root of 50. Now, the square root of 50 is not a perfect square. So I need to go ahead and find two factors that multiply to give me 50, with one being a perfect square. Okay? And immediately, I know that 25 times 2 are going to be the numbers I use because 25 is a perfect square. Okay? And then the square root of 25 is 5, and my I comes second, times the square root of 2, because that can be simplified no further. Okay? All right, on to the next one. So with this question, number 7, we are going to use square roots, okay? And before we do anything, before I start to solve, before I do anything that I can do, I need to know that I need to get my squared term all by itself. So I need to get 2x plus 1 squared all by itself before I can do anything. So the first thing I'm going to do, I need to move this 3 and this negative 156 to the other side somehow. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add 156 to both sides. Both sides of the equal sign. So now I am left with 3 times 2x plus 1 squared equals 243, because 87 times 243, plus 156 is 243, okay? This is still not by itself, right? I need to divide each side by 3, so these 3's will cancel out, and I'm left with 2x plus 1 squared equals, and 243 divided by 3 is 81, okay? And now, this question tells you exactly what to do. It says we have to we have to use square roots to get the answer. So, when I have a squared here, what I want to do is I'm going to take the square root of each side, okay? And if you remember, when you take the square root of a squared term, they both cancel out, and the middle drops down, okay? And then I'm left with the square root of 81, which is plus or minus 9, okay? But we're not done here, all right? We have to go ahead and solve because we have a plus and minus. So we're gonna break this up into 2 different equations. 2x plus 1 equals positive 9, and 2x plus 1 equals negative 9. And then all it is a 2-step equation. So I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides, and I have 2x equals 8. But x is still not by itself, so I need to go ahead and divide by 2. And my final answer should be 4. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the right side. I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides, and I'm left with 2x equals negative 10. And then I need to go ahead and divide both sides by 2. So now I'm left with x equals negative 5. And these are my 2 answers, okay? So the whole idea of solving by square roots is you have to make sure that you're getting that squared term by itself before you do anything, okay? All right, we're gonna turn to the back now. So on the back, we're talking more about the discriminant quadratic formula, and we're gonna factor and solve, okay? So using this example up here, we need to find the discriminant, okay? And with finding the discriminant, this is the equation I need. I need b squared minus 4ac. So in order to use that, I need to go ahead and label my a, b, and c. So in this case, a is 1, b is 6, and c is negative 7. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to plug those numbers back into this equation. So b is 6, so I'm plugging in 6, minus 4 times a times c. And if you notice here, I put parentheses around everything that I plugged in, and that is super, super important. Okay, you need to put it around every number that you plugged in. It will help you, believe me. Okay, and now what we're going to do is we are going to multiply what's left. So the first thing I need to do is 6 squared. And we all know that 6 squared is 36. Okay, and then what I need to do is I need to multiply negative 4 times 1 times negative 7. Okay. And a negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. And then negative 4 times negative 7 gives me a positive 28. And 36 plus 28 is 64. Okay? But I also have to type the what solutions. I have to write what type of solutions this is. And if you remember, when your answer is equal to 0, it's 1 solution. If your answer is positive, it's 2 real solutions. And if your answer is negative, it's no real solutions. Okay? So in this case, the right answer would be 2 real solutions because it's a positive 64. Okay? All right, so now we are going to go ahead. We've done the discriminant, so now we need to go ahead and solve. We're going to use the quadratic formula, okay? So my quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, and the good thing about this is I've already labeled my a, b, and c up here. So I'm just going to use the same numbers because I'm solving the same example. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and plug in. So x equals negative b, which is 6, plus or minus b squared, which becomes 6 squared, minus 4 times 1 times negative 7 all over 2 times 1. Okay? And then all we're doing now is just simplifying. So I have x equals a negative times this positive 6 becomes a negative 6, plus or minus the square root of 6 squared, which is 36. And then I need to go ahead and multiply these three numbers. Okay? And I know that it's 28. All over 2 times 1, which is just 2. Okay, and now I'm going to bring it up to the top a little bit more because I don't have much room. So I'm going to go ahead and simplify this again. So now I have x equals negative 6 plus or minus. Now, the square root of 36 plus 28. And we know that from above, it's 64. All over 2. Okay? And then my last step is just to take the square root of 64. And I know that the square root of 64 is 8. Okay? But because I have real numbers here, this is not my final answer. Okay? I need to break this down into two different equations because of this plus or minus. So I have x equals negative 6 plus 8 over 2, and x equals negative 6 minus 8 over 2. Okay? And I can simplify this to 2 over 2, which will then simplify to 1. And I can simplify this to negative 14 over 2, which simplifies to negative 7. And these are my two answers. Okay? So that's how we use the quadratic formula. All right, now we're on to 8C, and this is very similar to question number 1, okay? So we need to go ahead and factor. So my problem from up top was x squared, I think it said plus 6x minus 7 equals 0, okay? And we need to follow the same exact steps that we followed on the first page. So the first thing was to label A, B, and C, which at this point you already would have done. And then the second, so we can list A equals 1, B equals 6, C equals negative 7. So then the next thing you would do is go ahead and multiply A times C, which in this case is negative 7. And you'll find all of the factors of negative 7. And now this is easy because we only have one factor. And it's 1 times negative 7 or negative 1 times positive 7. Okay? And then what we need to do is we need to pick the factor pair that adds up to 6. And I know that it's this one because I'm looking for a positive 6. And 1 plus negative 7 would be a negative 6. So we don't want to worry about that one. Okay? And if you remember from the first question, when A is 1, which it is, we can just write parentheses with x being the first term. And then we're just going to plug our numbers in. So x minus 1 and x plus 7. Okay? But we are not done here because we need to solve. So what we have right now is x minus 1 and x plus 7 equals 0. But I am solving. Okay? So that means I need to get x by itself. So here, we are going to use the zero product property. And I'm going to set both parentheses up to 0 so I can solve. Okay, so in this first parenthesis, I'm going to add 1 to both sides, and I'm left with x equals 1, so that's one answer. And then I'm going to come to the other side and subtract 7 from both sides, and x equals negative 7, and I know that that's the answer. Okay, so that's how you would solve something. So whenever we see solve and factoring, you have to know that you're using the zero product property. Okay? All right, the last thing that we are doing is just going to label which is one solution, two solutions, and real solutions. And we know this. We know how to do this by how many times it crosses the x-axis. So, and how many times the graph crosses the x-axis. Okay? So, when I'm looking at the first graph, how many times do we see a red dot? Does it cross that x-axis? And here, I see 2 red dots. So I know that it is 2 real solutions. And in this case, 2 real solutions is answer B. Okay? And then I'm looking at the second one, and I see that it only touches once. So I know that must be 1 real solution. So my answer is A. Here, the graph never touches the x-axis, so I know that the answer is C. Okay? So that was your review. So if you have any questions, please email me, okay? Text me, and you have some time next week to get on, or this week to get on Google Zoom with me after school so we can go over some things, all right?